There are two essential parts to well-formed preprints and articles: PDFs and XML. Just as water requires both hydrogen and oxygen, advanced publication typically requires both a PDF and an XML file to be found as easily as possible by search engines. The XML file may be a short file containing only metadata, and when I say metadata, I simply mean the author information, affiliation information, article, the title, the abstract, and possibly the keywords. Or the XML file may be a full version of the article. In the screenshot we're looking at right now, you can see circled in red all items that were automatically brought to the screen based on the XML for the article. There's also a link at the top to the PDF version. Many platforms use this type of system, so we can see all kinds of structure here on the site, and then the content of the article is actually pulled in based on XML provided. So what should you plan for? First, you need to have a platform for the preprints to live on. But wherever they live, you need to know what the platform requires. For example, a PDF at extremely high resolution, which might be fantastic for printing purposes, could take so long to download it would cause users to stop trying to download the article midstream. Having PDFs available that are created at appropriate settings with as little manual intervention as possible is a must. Also, how will you get or create XML if the platform requires article metadata or full text in the NLM-DTD? Additionally, how will the files be sent to the platform, and can that process be automated? You will also want to know if there are any parameters set by the hosting platform for how frequently you can post new preprints. Some people post a new preprint immediately, as soon as it is ready, possibly posting one every day. Others post once a week or once a month. So really you just need to know what's going to work best for you, and if there are any limits or parameters the hosting platform might have that would want to affect what you choose to do. So in summary today, for best practices for publish ahead of print, the following practices will help ensure your publish ahead of print processes are successful. Choose a standard way across your organization to refer to preprints. Even if you have to make everyone get in one room and have a meeting and agree on what the standard wording will be, I strongly recommend if everyone is referring to them in the same way, you'll certainly be happier down the road and have less confusion. In addition, assign a DOI to every preprint. On screen here, I've given an example DOI. You can see there is a prefix and a suffix. The prefix is assigned to the publication or to the organization who puts out the publication. And that typically happens when you have joint cross-ref. Now the suffix can be very different. It's always alphanumeric, but you certainly can play with it to some degree. However, you want to make sure that it is unique so that no two articles can ever end up having been assigned the same DOI. Know the reasons you want to implement preprints. Choosing which preprint model is best for your publication depends heavily on the main goals you hope to accomplish. Be sure to get buy-in from everyone, authors, readers, and your editorial staff. Understand production quality increases as time increases. When determining where in the publication process to publish a preprint version of an article, you have to keep this in mind. Keep it simple and streamlined whenever possible. Do not expect you will have time or even remember to make time to streamline the process sometime later in the game. Have a user-friendly interface. I'm sure all of us have gone to a website at one time or another and thought to ourselves either this is ugly or this website is confusing. or this is just not worth my time to try and navigate. I can't seem to find what I want. So make sure you have a user-friendly interface and get feedback about it from a number of different people in your organization and different types of users within your group. Expect to reach users who are not members and subscribers. More and more, we have people going immediately to a search engine to look for something. And if your XML and PDFs are being indexed correctly, you certainly want to expect that if the keywords typed in are correct for that search, they're going to be finding your content. So expect to reach people who aren't members and subscribers already. And also be sure you've branded every page, even pages which show preprints, so that people certainly know where the content came from. That'll certainly help ensure that they come back to you in the future, and maybe even determine whether or not they'd like to become a member or a subscriber. Know where your PDFs and your XML originate. If you're going to post at the accepted manuscript stage, then your XML and PDFs are most likely to come out of an online peer review system. However, if you're going to publish final versions of the article, often the XML and the PDFs would come from a typesetting system. Be sure you know where they're coming from so that you can send them to where they need to go as easily as possible. And be sure you implement a detailed plan. When you decide to post preprints, make sure you have someone who knows all of the steps that need to happen as part of the process, someone who actually knows the answers and has seen it actually in action, and someone that is kind of a point person people can go to with any questions they have about when will a preprint post, or should I be concerned that it has not posted yet. So, all right, at this time, I'd like to go ahead and open it up for questions. I see that we had a number of questions submitted, so I guess we'll go ahead and start with those. The first question, do you need page numbers for ahead of print articles? So certainly, I don't think it could hurt if you do have page numbers for ahead of print articles. Certainly, if it is the final version of a manuscript, then yes, I would say you definitely want to have those page numbers included in the print, in the PDF of the article, pardon me. Now, in terms of if it's just an accepted manuscript and you're posting at that stage, a number of peer review systems do number the pages, and if the author submitted a Word document that has page numbers showing, that can be useful as well. But certainly for a preprint that is at a stage prior to final publication, the DOI is going to be the #1 way people will go and use that information to find it in the future rather than the page numbers. All right, the next question is, what is the final citation of a preprint article? So certainly many times the final citation of a preprint article is going to look just like the actual final citation would if it were not a preprint. There are a number of platforms these days people use to post their publications online, especially with online journal platforms, which will even have a link in them that you can click to download the citation for that article. And certainly that's a fantastic feature not only for researchers, but then also that certainly means that your content is more likely to get cited correctly. But certainly we do have many people who also have the DOI as part of the citation, and I certainly would think that's a fine thing to include, or to use a platform possibly which automatically would link you to other places articles are in the reference section. The next question we have, what about the alternative of PDFX, where the metadata travels with the PDF as opposed to providing separate PDF and XML files? I certainly think any kind of metadata that can be put in the PDF, that's not ever going to be something I would say is a bad idea. However, in the discussion that I had today, one of the reasons I recommend both a PDF and an XML file is that that XML file is then used for what shows up on screen when you're looking at information about the preprints for a specific publication. So if I'm looking at a list of all the preprints for a publication, often the title and the author information has come directly from that XML metadata file. If you can get that to show up from your PDFX file, then that would be fine, but you certainly don't want to just have a list of links to PDFs without some additional information on screen telling people what the content of those PDFs relates to. You know, if you just see a list of different PDFs and people would have to click through each one to see which one they might be interested in, that could certainly be confusing, and people might not always get to where they really were wanting to go. Our next question, what are best practices for correcting a posted, published preprint article and communicating the changes to readers and secondary services? Anytime you are posting a new version of the article, that DOI should then be registered, and that really makes sure that websites, certainly the publication's website, and then any of the services that link to that website would link you to the most current version. And in terms of communicating those changes to readers and secondary services, ideally for readers it's completely seamless and they never even necessarily notice, and then making sure that that DOI is registered again as a final version article will certainly help with some of the secondary services as well. All right, our next question, would there be any advantage to publish ahead of print in terms of impact factor? I personally don't see how it could hurt to make sure that you are publishing articles as soon as possible. Your impact factor is based on not only citations in your articles and how many articles you're putting out, but also on who's citing you. So the sooner you can be cited, certainly the better off you are. So I would definitely think it could only have a positive effect on your impact factor. Our next question is, should authors cite the printed citation or the preprint? I would say typically you're going to want to cite the most current version of an article, and if you've had one DOI for all the versions of that article, that certainly helps make sure that people can find it. There are some platforms which also have a link to let you go back to a previous version if there was a preprint posted. And in terms of how useful that would be, that's certainly going to be based on probably the amount of revisions that happen to the article. You certainly hope that the science never changes from one version to another, even if the paragraphs around that information change dramatically and maybe are much more grammatically correct. So, our next question, where a final version is used, do other publishers allow authors to update in-press references before it goes to press? Certainly, as a best practice, I would say no. Do not ever allow the authors to update the file in any way once it's been posted, before it goes to press. It certainly would be confusing to people if what's posted on the website and stays on the website is actually different than if they looked at the printed version. And just as a matter of practice, I would say it's certainly not a problem. So you can see what date something was actually published, and then one of the references was published after that. It certainly wouldn't make any sense necessarily for them to have cited the final version before